Cable television, are we ready? I'm calling to order this hearing or roundtable. This is actually a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, January 30th, 2023. Time is 12:09 in the afternoon. This is the first of two hearings that the Committee of the Whole is having today. This hearing concerns PR 25-48, which is entitled the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. This hearing will be followed by a hearing on the nomination for appointment of Kathy Patterson, reappointment of Kathy Patterson as auditor of the District of Columbia. The hearing before us right now, as I said, concerns PR 25-48. The stated purpose of PR 25-48 is to approve the proposed Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan. This small area plan was initiated by the Office of Planning in April 2021. A draft was made public September 1st, 2022, and a mayoral hearing was held on October 1st, 2022. The law requires that following that mayoral hearing, the small area plan has to be submitted to the council within, I believe, 60 days or something like that, which happened. It was introduced late last fall. And because it was at the end of the council period, the measure was held over, which we can do for resolutions that have a time limit to them, as this does. The purpose of the small area plan is to set a community-informed vision for future development in the Pennsylvania Avenue East neighborhood. The vision is to facilitate increased investment in inclusive resources and neighborhood amenities, diverse housing opportunities, and improved public spaces. The plan is organized around the following core themes: economic development and retail opportunity, transportation access and connectivity, housing opportunities and affordability, and vibrant public realm and urban design. Once approved, the small area plan will provide supplemental guidance to the Zoning Commission and other district agencies in carrying out the policies of the comprehensive plan. The small area plan does not amend the comprehensive plan. That can only happen by act. But it does provide, as I said, supplemental guidance to the Zoning Commission. The record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. on Monday, February 6, 2023. That would be a week from today. The record will close a week from today because we intend to take this measure up at the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 7th, together with the legislative meeting for approval. So anyone who wishes to supplement the remarks or is not testifying today but wishes to submit comments has until 5 p.m. Monday, February 6th. We have 7 witnesses before we get to the executive. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to recognize my colleague, Councilmember Vince Gray, who is participating online. If you have an opening statement, Councilmember, and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for calling this important hearing on the resolution to approve the Pennsylvania Avenue East area plan. I've got my staff with me, with Sheila, who's the chief of staff, with me. So I may ask her to substitute along with me as we continue to work on this. So I hope you'll work with me to make that happen. The plan covers Pennsylvania Avenue southeast from Sousa Bridge to Southern Avenue in Ward 7. In response to a request from the community, I worked with my colleagues to fund Pennsylvania to fund the Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street program, fund a small area plan, and that involves the additional, hold on, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal year 21 budget. The 2008 small area plan was in need of an update to involve the corridor and prime efforts for the work for improvement, for strategic improvement. The main street is operable, is now operable, and has already has been instrumental in assisting a number of the corridors along the corridor, businesses along the corridor. I'm happy to see the completed small area plan before the council. I want to thank all those who played a role in the development of this plan and the acknowledgement of the. Hang on a second, Mr. Chairman. And acknowledge anyone also included in the plan. I want to welcome all the witnesses who are here and participating, and I want to thank them very much for their efforts thus far. I look forward to today's discussion and approve this resolution and plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. At this point, I'll call the witnesses. Kelvin Brown, who's chair of ANC 7B, Travis Swanson, who's a commissioner on ANC 7B, Valerio Zanini, Jacqueline Cannon, who is chair of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition, M. Viveka Miller, who is communications director for the Pennsylvania East Community Coalition, Letitia Atkins, who is program director with the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street, and Alicia Dorsey, who is with DC Accounting Lab. So each of you are being let in, and we'll take each of you in turn. The hearing notice. I'm not sure how many folks actually look at the hearing notice, but this one says testimony is limited to 4 minutes. So if you would please keep your remarks to 4 minutes. If you're in gallery view on Zoom, you should see the clock. It's usually in the top line. And Commissioner Brown, you are first. You are muted, so.
There we go. All right. Can you hear me now, Chairman?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for holding this hearing on this most important Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Small Area Plan. Also, good afternoon to my Councilmember Vincent Gray. I'm here today to provide input on the Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Small Area Plan. Hello, my name is Kelvin Brown. I'm currently the chairperson for Advisory Commission 7B and Commissioner representing Single Member District 7B06. I come before you today to provide written and verbal testimony in support of the DC Office on Planning proposed Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan. I'm here today to voice my strong support for the proposed plan and to acknowledge the excellent partnership that has been formed between the DC Office of Planning and Advisory Neighborhood Commission 7B. Through many planning meetings, community outreach activities, and presentations during ANC meetings, DCOP has worked tirelessly to seek input from our residents and to ensure that they were included within the planning process. It's truly been a labor of love, but the work in crafting this plan has been completed. This small area plan represents a new future and a revitalized effort to improve the lives of residents east of the river. It's truly a future for ours to reimagine. Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and Pennsylvania Avenue as a whole is one of the nation's most recognized and iconic streets in America. However, Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast from the Sousa Bridge to Southern Avenue Southeast has been historically disinvested, left behind, and has had no development in several years. The experience of living, working, and enjoying recreational activities along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast is pretty bleak. There have been no opportunities for community-led development, safety improvements, or beautification. And for years, many residents have complained about the lack of retail shopping, eateries, nightlife, affordable housing, jobs, and the ongoing unsafe conditions related to crime, but nothing has been done. And given the state of this area, it's our time to right these wrongs and ensure we have an equitable look at our collective future. We have an opportunity to reimagine, renovate, and breathe new life into this stretch of Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. And with this opportunity, residents have expressed a direct desire to improve the overall area to make it more pedestrian friendly, safe, clean, and a place to call home. Residents would like better safety improvements, mixed use development of retail and housing, affordable home ownership opportunities, good paying jobs, sit down restaurants, and lastly, community-led development that mitigates displacement that is associated with gentrification. So I thank you, Chairman, for holding today's hearing regarding PR 2548, Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. It is my hope that you will take all the testimony that you will hear today into consideration as you vote as a committee. Please ensure our residents' best interests are centered in your decision-making. And lastly, on behalf of ANC 7B, I'm attaching a copy of the approved and signed resolution regarding the Pennsylvania Avenue Small Area Plan. And if you have any questions regarding this resolution, please contact myself or the author of the resolution. That completes my testimony and in support of the revised and proposed Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Small Area Plan. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councilmember Vincent Gray.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do not have a copy of your statement or the attached resolution. So if you could resubmit those.
I will.
And the address is cow@dccouncil.gov.
I didn't hear your last statement.
cow@dccouncil.
I have.
And so you are testifying on behalf of the commission.
I'm testifying. Yes, sir. Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. The next witness is Travis Swanson, who's also commissioner with ANC 7B.
Good afternoon. I want to start by saying thank you to Chairman Mendelson for holding today's hearing and to Councilmember Gray for his supporting remarks. It's always great to see you, Councilmember, and I'm glad you're doing well. My name is Travis R. Swanson, and I am the commissioner who has the honor and privilege of representing ANC 7B03, which includes most of the Randall Highlands community, including the south side of Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast between Minnesota Avenue and 30th Street. In addition to representing the residents of 7B03, I also serve as the treasurer of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition, or PAECC, which is a nonprofit organization representing area stakeholder groups and individuals interested in the revitalization of Pennsylvania Avenue between the John Philip Sousa Bridge and Southern Avenue. In 2020, PAECC was the organization that successfully advocated for the creation of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street, as well as worked closely with the Office of Planning as they were developing the small area plan you're considering today. I'm here today to express my strong support for the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. Pennsylvania Avenue is designated as one of America's great streets, yet when you cross the Sousa Bridge to Pennsylvania Avenue east of the Anacostia River, you will see that the portions of Pennsylvania Avenue in Ward 7 have not kept pace nor experienced the same revitalization that has occurred on the portions of Pennsylvania Avenue in Wards 2 and Ward 6. The Ward 7 communities along the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor lack the amenities that other parts of the cities enjoy, such as restaurants, bars, entertainment, and grocery stores. One of the things I often hear when speaking to residents of Randall Highlands is that they would love a cafe that they could just walk to, sit down, and enjoy a cup of coffee, but we don't even have that much. The Ward 7 portion of Pennsylvania Avenue corridor also lacks public transportation infrastructure and accessibilities that residents near the Wards 2 and Ward 6 portions of Pennsylvania Avenue enjoy. Our slice of Pennsylvania Avenue isn't served by Metro Rail, and since 2020, we have had several of our bus routes cut. When I first moved to Randall Highlands in 2015, our neighborhood was served by routes 30N, 30S, 32, 34, 36, M6, and the 39 limited stop, the only limited stop bus route serving ANC 7B. Since 2020, WMATA cut the routes 30N, 30S, 34, and 39, which has been a significant reduction for us. DDOT has identified Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast between 2nd Street and Southern Avenue as part of their comprehensive bus priority plan corridor. However, when conducting studies on potential improvements and ultimately moving forward with implementation, they only studied and began implementations on the sections of Pennsylvania Avenue between 2nd Street and Barney Circle in Ward 6, again leaving the Ward 7 portion of Pennsylvania Avenue behind. In addition to lacking amenities, it seems as of lately that we are slowly having our economic potential removed from the corridor as developers buy up properties and make plans to build 100% residential buildings rather than mixed-use buildings. We tend to see along other major corridors in the city. As much as I would like it to, residents of Randall Highlands don't expect Pennsylvania Avenue or this proposed plan to fix all of our amenity needs overnight. We know that there is a lot of work to be done to attract the amenities we want and need and provide housing to people of all incomes without displacing our long-term neighbors. We believe that the council took the first step in establishing this by establishing and funding the Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street, and that the next step is the passage and implementation of the small area plan. On January 19th, 2023, ANC 7B passed the resolution in support of the small area plan, which asks for passage of the plan as well as calls for the Council on Racial Equity to review the plan as proposed before implementation to study the impact that implementation would have on long-term residents and to modify the plan if it's determined that implementation would displace our long-term neighbors. Additionally, ANC 7B's resolution calls for the construction of mixed-use buildings along Pennsylvania Avenue and for the Board of Zoning to expedite while still soliciting and considering the great weight of ANC 7B zoning cases, which pertain to new developments along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast between the Sousa Bridge and Southern Avenue. I strongly support the proposed small area plan update because it provides a vision for a gateway to the corridor that is vibrant, was created with more than a year of meetings with input from the community, and meets with the needs of the adjacent neighborhoods. This updated plan focuses on implementation efforts along the length of the Ward 7 portion of Pennsylvania Avenue, and the updates provide recommendations to enhance safe accessibility and vibrant public realm with an emphasis on pedestrian and public transportation accessibility. It encourages economic development and retail opportunities for our communities that we have been asking for decades. I apologize for going just a little bit over time, but I thank you for your time and welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Swanson. I will have a question for you. Valerio Zanini. I don't believe that person's here. Jacqueline Cannon. I don't think she's here. Viveka Miller.
Good afternoon, Chairman Phil Mendelson and Chairman Gray and any other council member that's on this webinar. My name is Vivica Miller, and I am the Communications Director of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition, PAECC, an organization representing area stakeholder groups and individuals interested in revitalizing Penn Ave East, which is at the foot of the Sousa Bridge to Southern Avenue. As stated by Commissioner Swanson, PAECC is the organization that successfully advocated for the small area plan update. I have lived in the Ward 7 DuPont Park neighborhood for 20 years. My testimony today supports PR 2548, Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. I support this resolution because redevelopment of Pennsylvania Avenue East is needed to address the corridor's vacant and dilapidated building stock, which lacks visual appeal, and outdated strip malls that play a role in the area's lack of retail amenities, which has not kept pace with the rest of the city. The Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Corridor Land Development Plan, which is a small area plan that was approved by the council dated January 2008, states, as one of the city's most important thoroughfares, Pennsylvania Avenue both deserves and requires special attention and consideration to retain its stature and vitality. Pennsylvania Avenue deserves sensitive redevelopment, special public realm treatment, and better retail opportunities. Community leaders have been striving to achieve these goals for many years, and this is taken verbatim from that 2008 Corridor Land Development Plan. In our neighborhoods, there have been a history of planning without implementation. A 2016 Office of Planning follow-up study evaluated the progress made on the 2008 small area plans, 19 recommended actions. Only 2 of these 19 actions have been completed, and little additional headway has occurred since. We want physical and economic improvements, retail and real estate investment, and better transportation and grocery opportunities. PR 2548, Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 22 addresses these desires and needs: economic development and retail opportunities, transportation access and connectivity, housing opportunities and affordabilities, and vibrant public realm and urban designs. We are asking for our fair shot and for what is right. The time is now. As DC fights for representation, our community fights for redevelopment and revitalization. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this vital community issue.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Letitia Atkins.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Gray, and other members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Letitia Atkins, and I am the Director of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street. We are a program located within the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization here in Ward 7. Today, I am providing these comments in support of PR 25-48, Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. The mission of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street program is to revitalize retail, retain and attract a diverse customer base, empower surrounding communities, and develop businesses along the Pennsylvania Avenue East corridor. PIMS serves as an advocate for these businesses while providing valuable information, resources, and technical assistance to enhance their economic vitality. Funding provided through the district's Department of Small and Local Business Development provides an opportunity to invest in a DC business corridor that has struggled through hardship and attempted to reinvent itself many times over the years. This funding has been integral to the survival of many of the corridor's small businesses. The corridor is a major commuter thoroughfare and borders several neighborhoods. As referenced in the proposed small area plan, approximately 40,000 vehicles drive along Pennsylvania Avenue East daily. And as a result, retail businesses can benefit from substantial visibility and capture spending from commuters on their way to and from downtown DC. However, concerns such as lack of adequate parking, pedestrian safety, and poor transportation infrastructure pose a threat to the success of the corridor. The Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan seeks to direct public, private, and philanthropic investments along the corridor and will serve as a guide towards equitable development for the district government, community stakeholders, and real estate developers to follow. The Pennsylvania Avenue East Corridor is essential, as it is one of the last large corridors of Ward 7 in need of economic attention. Continued investments in the corridor will assist in developing a vision for a gateway corridor that is economically vibrant and meets neighborhood needs. The recommendations set forth in the proposed small area plan will provide the catalyst to future growth needed along the corridor. It is with great enthusiasm that I submit these comments today in support of PR 2548, the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. We look forward to implementation of the plan and partnering to amplify the corridor's visibility and promote opportunities to retain and attract investments that will assist in improving the economic outcomes of the surrounding communities in corridor. Thank you. I am available as well to answer any questions which you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Alicia Dorsey.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Chairman and Councilman Gray. It's me again, Alicia Dorsey, wife, mother of 4, entrepreneur, Ward 7 resident, and constituent. You may recall that I previously reached out to discuss school equity in the Far East communities in Ward 7 and Ward 8. I recently submitted a proposal to create equity in top quality schools because all the top DC's public schools are in Northwest, even though more than 43% of all public school students live in the Far East communities. My proposal highlights that more than 2,640 students living in the Far East communities attend schools in Northwest daily. This inequity strains the entire system. Northwest schools are overcrowded while Far East schools are under-enrolled. I had originally intended to talk to you about my school equity proposal this afternoon until I read the agenda. The Pennsylvania Avenue Small Area Plan is directly connected to my proposal, which highlights research that correlates education achievement gaps to high concentrations of poverty. Those correlations are evident in DCPS. Ward 7 and Ward 8 have the highest concentrations of poverty in DC. Ward 7 and Ward 8 also have the lowest performing schools. Ward 7 and Ward 8 also have the highest percentage of low-income housing units in the district, nearly 50% combined. Ward 7 and Ward 8 are food deserts because the median household incomes do not meet developer and lender business models. Additionally, Ward 7 and Ward 8 have the highest density of violent crime per child. Ward 7 and Ward 8 have the lowest property values in the district. We all agree that most of these inequities stem from inherited systemic racist housing policies, so I believe that is precisely where we must begin to create equity. To that end, the affordable housing targets outlined in the 2025 dedicated affordable housing production goals are not equitable. Based on the Office of Planning study of the distribution of affordable units, the Far East communities house nearly 50% of all low-income affordable units. However, the low-income targets outlined in the Housing Equity Report erroneously reflect an equal rather than equitable distribution of the total targeted 12,000 new affordable housing units across the 10 planning areas identified. This policy contradicts DC Office of Planning goals to focus new affordable housing opportunities in those areas that lack it today. Rather, the current housing targets provide for 1,610 of the new low-income units to be housed in the Far East communities. This is nearly equal to the Rock Creek West target of 1,990 low-income units, even though Rock Creek West houses only 0.01% of the current distribution of low-income units. Based on the high concentrations of affordable housing that already exist in the Far East communities, there should be no new affordable units added. Even with the naturally occurring loss rates of low-income housing cited by the Office of Planning, the Far East communities should not be included in the affordable housing targets until more parity exists in the distribution of current affordable housing units citywide. I realize that I'm a little late to this party, but you'll have to forgive me as I've been preoccupied with advocacy for equity and education in the Far East communities. However, as currently written, the recommendations around housing affordability contained in the Pennsylvania Avenue East area small area plan will increase concentrations of poverty and increase concentrations of low-income housing in the Far East communities. This will further exacerbate current affordable housing inequities. I request that you approve PR 2548, however, with modifications to remove theme 3 affordable housing recommendations, as they do not support the DC Office of Planning goals towards an equitable distribution of affordable housing. In fact, a bold housing policy that would significantly help restore equity in the distribution of affordable housing would be to impose on the Far East communities the same land use and zoning restrictions that currently limit housing density in Rock Creek West and other communities in Northwest that do not currently carry their fair share of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey. Jacqueline Cannon, I called earlier. I believe she's arrived. Ms.
Yes, sir, I
Cannon?
am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the council. My name is Jacqueline Cannon, and I submit this testimony as chair of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition, or PAECC. I am a 25-year Ward 7 resident and reside in the Penn Branch neighborhood. My testimony on behalf of PAECC today supports PR 25-48, Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. How did we get here? During District of Columbia's FY21 budget cycle, PAECC submitted a budget ask to Council Member Vincent Gray, who's here today. Hello, Council Member Gray. We submitted written testimony, testified at the DC budget hearings, and sent letters to the mayor, city council, and other DC government officials to garner support for a Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan update. We successfully gained the support of Councilmember Gray, Ward 7 Councilmember John Falchicchio, at the time interim deputy mayor for planning and economic development, and Kenyon McDuffie, at the time Ward 5 Councilmember and chair of the Committee of Business and Economic Development, to support and fund an update to the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan, or the SAP. We were successful and funds were allocated for the SAP update. The SAP updates were initiated by the Office of Planning in April 2021 and involved the Pennsylvania Avenue East community by establishing a community advisory committee in which several of our PAECC board of directors, including myself, participated. A draft plan was made public on September 1st, 2022, and a mayoral hearing was held on October 1st, 2022. The purpose of the SAP is to set a community-informed vision for future development in the Pennsylvania Avenue East neighborhoods. The vision is to facilitate increased investment in inclusive resources and neighborhood amenities, diverse housing opportunities, and improved public spaces. Why is this plan important? Because for the past 21 years, numerous studies and reports, as noted on PAECC's website, pennaveast.com/resources.html, have been issued, including an Office of Planning Small Area Plan dated January of 2008, and the current DC Comprehensive Plan. Unfortunately, there has been little or no implementation of recommendations from these plans to date. Pennsylvania Avenue is one of America's great streets, but the entry into our neighborhoods from the Sousa Bridge to the 2700 block of Pennsylvania Avenue looks very different from the rest of this historic street. You see obsolete, deteriorated, and vacant buildings. These conditions are eyesores and contribute to health disparities, juvenile delinquency, littering, loitering, poverty, and crime that impedes the provision or expansion of safe, sanitary neighborhoods with thriving local businesses and housing. Pennsylvania Avenue East is underserved by retail amenities, grocery stores, and restaurants. It is a vital community corridor that serves over 25,000 DC residents within a 1-mile radius, but has no metro access. Residents of Pennsylvania Avenue East have waited over 2 decades for corresponding investment, and as a community with a particularly high risk of health and economic impacts that we saw from COVID-19. We need help now. The timing is now for government and private investment to deliver better services to our community. DC income and property tax paying residents like me who live along the Pennsylvania Avenue East corridor are entitled to vibrant, prosperous neighborhoods with the same or similar amenities enjoyed by DC residents in other areas of the city. Again, PAECC supports PR 25-48, Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan Resolution of 2022. And thank you for this opportunity to speak on this very critical community issue. I also available for questions.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Cannon.
Thank you, sir.
I was going to ask of Ms. Miller, but others can jump in if they wish. She in her statement said only 2 of 19 actions from the 2008 plan were completed. So give examples of what weren't completed.
Chairman Milderson, I do not have that information readily available, but can provide that at a later date. I can send it to the website that has been provided.
Okay, which is cow@dccouncil.gov.
Yes, I will send that today.
Thank you. Ms. Cannon, you spoke of the lack of enforcement. Can you speak to any of the provisions that were not, or recommendations that were not implemented?
No, sir, I cannot at this point. I wasn't prepared with my list, but there is a long list of recommendations, as Ms. Miller mentioned, that were not accomplished.
Yeah. Is there anybody who can, because I was going to ask the director of OP about this, but it would help to know some specifics. Anybody else who can help me here? Then let me turn to another question, and this is for Commissioner Swanson. Near the end of your statement, you mentioned, and I'll read, AMC 7B passed a resolution in support of the small area plan, which asks for passage of the plan, as well as calls for the Council on Racial Equity to review the proposed small area plan before implementation, to study the impact implementation will have on long-term residents, etc. Do you mean the council's Office on Racial Equity, CORE?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman Mendelson. Sorry for the mix-up. We just want to make sure that our long-term residents aren't going to be displaced by implementation. And we know that there are safeguards that are usually in place for that, but we just like to make sure that we're not going to be pushing our long-term residents out of the neighborhood.
And Chairman Mendelson, I would like just to add to Commissioner Swanson's statements as it relates to DC Core. So one of the other thing that we want to make sure of in the resolution was passed by ANC 7B is that not only are we focusing on the negative impacts of gentrification as it relates to displacement of historically Black residents east of the river, but also we want to make sure that there's equitable access to the economic development that is coming to the community as far as opportunities to participate in not just the planning, but business opportunities, opportunities to purchase homes that might be coming for sale, and really the opportunity to participate in the planning around overall public safety as well.
I'll ask the director of the Office of Planning about this. I don't have the resolution in front of me, so that's why I didn't ask about that. But your point was equitable access for business to business opportunities. That's sort of the way I wrote it down.
That's correct, Chairman.
Okay.
And Chairman Mendelson, I also wanted to let you know I did attach a copy of the resolution to my written remarks also. It came as a separate attachment, but in the same email.
Actually, you did. Thank you. All right, I'll try to look at that quickly before I ask questions of the OP director. The council's office on racial equity does not do racial equity assessments on resolutions. And so it would not be the place to look for an assessment with regard to the small area plan. However, in the comprehensive plan, we adopted language or included language or added language that requires that the zoning commission in its actions have an equity tool. That doesn't necessarily apply to the small area plan because it would only be those aspects of the small area plan that come to the council. I'll ask the Office of Planning Director about this and see what she can add. But the place to look for either an equity assessment or mitigating measures to promote equity would be on the executive branch. The mayor does have an office on racial equity. When we established the council office on racial equity, we required that the mayor have one as well. So that office deals with the executive branch, and then separately, the zoning commission is supposed to have an equity tool or lens for its decision-making process.
And I do believe that the ultimate goal of ANC 7B was just to make sure that it does go through a process and has make sure that a racial equity lens is applied to the implementation.
Yeah. And that might be more aspirational than we want it to be. But on the other hand, this is the more we press and push, the more likely we're to succeed in getting that kind of analysis or lens. My other question is for Ms. Dorsey.
Yes, good afternoon.
You requested we approve the resolution, but with modifications. We are unable to modify the small area plan. That's the way this is set up. We can modify a bill. In this case, if there were to be a bill, it would be an amendment to the comprehensive plan, which I'm pretty sure the executive would not want to do because it would reopen the entire plan to the council for modifications. So instead we get a resolution which is up or down, and we are unable to modify it. Would you still suggest that we approve the resolution, the small area plan?
No, to be honest with you, I think this issue is so critical to neighborhoods east of the river and the impacts that I mentioned in my remarks. It's overarching and really should be reconsidered as everyone's discussing for racial equity impacts, but perhaps not in the manner that others have been discussing in the past. As I mentioned, we are already carrying 50% of the affordable housing units for the city. And I just don't see how adding additional units to this part of the city would be helpful to the efforts to equitably distribute affordable housing units across the city. However, as a Penn Branch resident, I am excited about the other components of the resolution. It really just is a matter of trying to take Mayor Bowser's approach of a whole of government approach and really look at how some of these proposals that we're putting in place are impacting other things that we're seeing in our communities.
Well, just to push back, would it be fair to say that you're advocating a no growth solution until there is more affordable housing built in basically west of the park?
Not at all. I'm advocating growth. As I mentioned, I support the resolution. I'm not advocating increasing the concentration of poverty in affordable housing in communities that are already holding and carrying the brunt of the impacts that come from this. As I mentioned, violence in our communities, low performing schools. We are food deserts. We cannot seem to get larger businesses to really invest over here in terms of groceries because they're looking at those factors like median household income. So if we're increasing affordable housing, my question is, we really should do some additional studies about how that's impacting these overarching issues that are impacting our communities.
Well, let me push back this way. You're making comparisons of Ward 7 and 8 as a whole compared to Northwest as a whole. This plan deals with the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor. And a lot of the characteristics that you note with regard to poverty, I'm not sure apply to the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor, even though they're correct with regard to Ward 7 and 8 overall.
Well, I would respond to that by saying I live within this Pennsylvania Avenue corridor that you're discussing. I hear gunshots every single night, and we are surrounded by violent communities, and we certainly have a significant amount of affordable housing within this same corridor. I'd have to look at the specific details, but again, as far as I am aware, this corridor that you're discussing really does also house a lot of the middle to higher income families or households that reside here within the ward. So you're going to essentially erode that population if you then increase affordable housing units into this particular corridor. It really just further concentrates more concentrations of affordable housing units and low-income housing, which I just don't see how that serves, the broader purposes of things that we're trying to improve in these neighborhoods east of the river.
Is there specific language in the plan that you find objectionable?
Yes, the addition of affordable housing units. As I mentioned, we have 50% of it over here already. I guess we could do further analysis to see what percentage of that really resides within the corridor as you're discussing. But as I mentioned, it really is of no consequence. It's just going to increase affordable housing units in a component of the city that is already holding 50% of it. And it speaks to the overall comprehensive plan. Just the targets overall are they're not equitable. They are equal. And that doesn't help when the system already is showing inequities. And so, again, I'm not trying to hold up progress. I really just am advocating for families like mine. I have 4 children. They walk this same corridor that you're really intending to put more affordable housing units in. They ride their bikes. And I'm trying to make sure that we are trying to improve conditions over here. It is not okay. And it's getting increasingly worse.
So I'm looking at the proposed targets, which is in the comprehensive plan. And it shows that of the 8 wards, the target for Ward 7 is the smallest of the 8 wards. And for Ward 3, it is the largest of the 8 wards. I wouldn't call that equal.
No, that in fact, I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing. However, I emailed you a copy of the 2 charts that are included in the 2018 Housing Equity Report and Comp Plan. And while your statistics may be correct, I'm not looking at the numbers directly, that may be accurate. But the problem is that outline is based on currently dividing equal units of affordable housing. But the point I'm making is that Ward 7 and Ward 8 already currently house 50% of those units. And the Rock Creek community.
Sure, but I'm not understanding your response to my observation.
Well, I think your observation is inaccurate, to be honest with you. The statistics that I quoted was that if you combine the two, Ward 7 and Ward 8, I think we were at 1,220 units or something like that compared to the 1,990. So I was drawing a comparison that if you look at the 12,000 units overall, they're just about divided about 10% across each of the 10 areas outlined in the plan. And that is meant to create an equal distribution of the new affordable housing units.
Okay, well, I'll repeat. And my source here is a map that's in the Chevy Chase small area plan. But I'm sure it's not the only place the map occurs. And it calls for 490 affordable units in Ward 7 and 1,990, or roughly 4 times more, in Rock Creek West. I would add as well that when I look at the Pennsylvania Avenue plan, and I get that you want to combine Ward 7 and 8, but this is actually a plan for Pennsylvania Avenue. I look at the recommendations, support zoning map amendments consistent with the comprehensive plan to increase housing supply and encourage a mixed income community that includes market rate and dedicated affordable housing without stating what levels of affordability. And affordability can be workforce, and workforce is, if I remember correctly, 80 to 120% of AMI. The second recommendation is maximize the provision of family-sized housing, multi-generational housing, and senior housing, especially through the planned unit development process. The third recommendation is maintain and improve existing rental housing opportunities along the corridor through collaborative partnerships while preserving naturally occurring affordable housing. And the fourth recommendation is develop partnerships between the Department of Housing and Community Development's training programs, community-based organizations, faith-based institutions, and other Black and people of color-led organizations, such as Marshall Heights Community Development Organization, to engage in regular training sessions in the community about housing opportunities. And the next recommendation is use the District Opportunity to Purchase Act for small apartment buildings to preserve affordability. And the next recommendation is to explore opportunities for the formation of a community land trust. There are 2 more, but I don't see anything here that talks about concentrating affordability. And I don't see anything that talks about low or extremely low income housing. Where it says affordable, which I think was really in only one of the recommendations, that could be workforce housing. And workforce housing includes, for example, teachers, firefighters.
Yes, and thank
So
you
I
for
get
that.
what you're saying, but I'm not quite seeing how for Pennsylvania Avenue East small area plan that it is increasing concentrations of poverty and low income housing.
So my response, Chairman, is really that it's in the plan in theme 3, I believe, it discusses and describes how the small area plan is serving to meet the 2018 housing targets outlined in the mayor's equity study and comp plan. And so to the extent that those parameters are increasing affordable housing units, in this Ward 7 and Ward 8 communities, my point is still that it follows that it's serving to increase affordable housing units in an area of the city that already houses 50% of those types of housing units. And as a result, it does not comport with the goals and the guidelines of increasing and creating, an equitable distribution of affordable housing units throughout the city. And so I'd have to look more specifically at the parameters that you outlined, but based on the the plan itself, it is highlighting the fact in theme 3 that it's meeting the housing targets outlined in the 2018 report.
Okay, thank you. Also, it's nice to meet you since we've exchanged emails about schools.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Gray, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the approach that you've taken with this discussion. Can we ask the witnesses who testified already today, have the efforts been sufficient to support public engagement in Ward 7? Yeah.
Great question, Councilmember Gray. I would emphatically say yes. DC Office of Planning, as I stated in my testimony, has had a number of recurring engagements with not only the ANC 7B, but we have been invited to lead, host, and facilitate meetings with the community. I believe Ms. Atkins led the economic development meeting for OP, and myself led the housing component to do outreach for the community. And this is just one of several meetings that have happened. Even though there was a transition within the office, there was no drop in level of engagement or level of service. So I would say absolutely, yes, there's been outreach engagement on behalf of OP, the ANC, Pennsylvania Avenue, East Main Streets, with Ms. Cannon, with many of our neighbors about this overall Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Small Area Plan. And many of the points that Ms. Dorsey mentioned as far as housing and making sure that we don't reconstitute poverty within this corridor were definitely brought up during the housing portion of the planning outreach meetings. And specifically, there was language put into the plan that's talked to and left open the framework so we can make sure that we were not introducing additional low to low income housing that would further degrade the overall economic vitality of the corridor on the surrounding neighborhoods.
And Councilmember Gray, I certainly concur with Commissioner Brown that there was a fair number of outreach by this Office of Planning to engage the community to make sure that our vision was included in the plan. And Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition, we outlined a number of items that were included in the final plan. And if I may take a moment to go back to the question that Chairman Mendelson asked a while ago about items that were referenced as missing in the small area plan that were not addressed. I went back and pulled up the small area plan from 2008, and there were several categories of areas targeted for improvement. One was transportation and infrastructure. Another was economic development. Clean and safe was another category, land use and housing. And if I may just focus on two of those categories, the economic development, one of the primary reasons why PAECC was established back in 2020, I believe it was to address the lack of economic development within our neighborhood, particularly along the Pennsylvania Avenue East corridor. And as such, we not only advocated with you, Councilmember Gray, for funding for the small area plan, but also funding for the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street. And two of the areas that were documented in the 2008 plan under economic development was create a marketing strategy to attract new retailers to vacant spaces. Number two was conduct analysis of technical assistance needs of existing businesses. And number three was to use commercial facade improvement grant program to create more attractive storefronts where buildings are not expected to redevelop. Now, these are three key items and missions, as I do believe, that's part of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street, or the Main Street Charter, was to address each one of these areas. So where we saw there was lacking a focus with quality retailers in the neighborhood, grocery stores, sit-down restaurants, those were things that we advocated for as part of driving the need for Pennsylvania Avenue East Main Street. So when we look at 2008 up to when the Main Street was actually established in 2021, there was a long time where there was a deficit, a lack of emphasis and execution of this implementation plan from 2008. I mean, that's just to name one area. Another one that Pennsylvania Avenue East has really focused on was the clean and safe, explore creation of a clean and safe team. There are countless reports that we have made and calls we've made to 311, meetings we've had with different government agencies about the safety and lack of cleanliness along the corridor. And Ms. Vivica can speak more to that than I can right now, but these are key areas that were part of the 2008 plan that were not, and as far as, you know, the community is concerned, were not addressed over the years until very recently.
I would just also quickly add on to Chairman Brown and Ms. Cannon's response to your question, Mayor Gray, is that the Office of Planning held these meetings over 15 months. And I think it was monthly meetings for a while, sometimes even more. There'd be special meetings in between. So there was definitely a lot of opportunity for public input and public participation as these meetings were happening over the course of close to a year and a half.
Not sure if I'm allowed to jump in here, Chairman, but I just wanted to admit that, yes, as a community member, I've seen the outreach and the solicitation for feedback. As I mentioned in my remarks, it's difficult. There's a lot of work to be done here. As a mom of 4, trying to make all of these meetings and make sure that I am staying abreast on all of these issues and having my voice heard is difficult. So while I applaud the efforts, I'm not 100% sure that we can say that that, you know, that all voices have been heard and represented, despite the efforts that have been made. But thank you.
Councilmember Gray, do you have more questions?
Yeah, just one, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if anybody can address how the small area plan reflects the desires of the community. Just to be sure that we have incorporated all of those issues, those questions, Mr. Chairman.
I can start by commenting on one thing that we, as I attended many of the hearings over the OP meetings over the 15-month period. And one thing that it seemed like they were hesitant to add to the small area plan at first was the community's desire to have a metro line come down Pennsylvania Avenue. There was a lot of pushback on that idea, putting that idea in. Their position, which is understandable, is that, you know, this is a shorter term plan than what a metro line would take. But, you know, we really kept pushing on that to say, like, look, like, we know what the timeline is on a metro line. Like, we just saw how the Silver Line was delayed by years. We know that if we don't start asking for something like a metro line now, that it takes 20 to 30 years for this to happen. We want that clock to start ticking now, which is why it was important for us to get that in the plan. And after hearing us out several times, Office of Planning did add a sentence in there about wanting a metro line here, just so for the fact of, we kept saying, we acknowledge that this isn't going to happen next year or even in the next 5 years, but we want that 20 to 30 year clock to start ticking today, not 10 years from now. So they really did listen to us and get that in. So that was just one example. And I'm sure, Ms. Cannon or Ms. Miller have others.
Yes, the Office of Planning focused in on economic development, retail opportunities, transportation access and connectivity, housing opportunities and affordability, vibrant public realm, and urban design. And with each topic, we had an opportunity to submit written comments regarding any of these areas, any or all. In addition, there were meetings, community meetings for open to the public to voice concerns. I attended all of the meetings that Office of Planning initiated. And there was opportunity for free-flowing comments and discussion.
Councilmember Gray, one thing that was brought up in a couple of the sessions was around the interagency collaboration of the small area plan with the DDOT, with DPW, with other agencies, DC governmental agencies, to make sure that there weren't any missing pieces or holes that the small area plan failed to address. And one of the big ones I believe Commissioner Swanson mentioned was around public safety and also around transportation. We wanted to make sure that this plan was communicated effectively and fully to all of those agencies so they would know exactly how their work impacts the overall corridor from the Sousa to Bridge to Southern Avenue Southeast.
And if I may add also, Councilmember Gray, one of the things that we heard continuously through the conversations around economic development and retail opportunities was the opportunity for mixed use development, where we could expand upon our retail uses in the core along the corridor. People want to see more viable retail options that are community serving. And so one thing that I can say is I do believe Office of Planning heard that, and they just by virtue of them requesting the map amendment where they are looking to rezone especially the lower node, because that appears to be the node where we may have the greatest opportunity to bring in those retail options. They did request that map amendment, and in terms of talking to developers who have purchased property, one of the things that they or the hesitation that they are having around the retail amenities is the fact that the current zoning would not prevent or would actually slow down that development. So myself and Commissioner Swanson have been meeting with at least one of those developers in hopes that they will reconsider that with this proposed map amendment that could hopefully expedite the changing of that zoning along that node.
Okay.
I can appreciate Alicia Dorsey's comments about affordable housing. In this instance, I think perhaps what we're missing is the term missing middle, the missing middle for the educators, the firefighters that Mayor Bowser, has advocated for, not necessarily for the low income housing, but affordable housing for those who are having problems. I mean, if you look at your tax base, the assessments, the housing stock in the Penn Ave East Corridor is far above affordable housing. And we were seeking affordable housing for the missing middle.
I would applaud efforts to really construct language that supports, government workers, teachers, firefighters, et cetera. My fear, however, is that the language may not currently do that. And as a result, we're going to have, a sort of creep in focus and mission and targeted populations for affordable housing. I don't know where the proper place is to sort of confirm that those are things that we have in there, but I would assume that those are things that we could, in fact, at least have folks highlight where we might, if to the extent it exists, that they can show us where that language is, and otherwise, just provide some assurances to the community that will work towards those targets.
So I have a question, Chairman Middleton. We don't want to see this plan not approved. We want it to go forward. So is it possible that it can, that language, a modification to include the term missing middle and spell out what that missing middle is? going forward with the approval?
No, we don't have that ability because this is a resolution that's a yes or no.
Okay,
The language in the plan, I read most of it, speaks of affordable without explaining what's meant by affordable. Now, I was only looking at the recommendations and not the surrounding text, so maybe it is there. But so based on my understanding, it would come down to individual cases if there was a development proposal, whether it was going to be the extremely low income end of the affordability spectrum, or it would be workforce housing, which is at the upper end of the affordable housing spectrum. When you say missing middle, what I'm hearing is what is considered workforce housing.
yes, that's correct.
80 to 120% AMI. And that varies. AMI varies if it's a household of one as opposed to a household of four. In the plan, it actually says not on that point, but related to the point, out of the 1,570 attached and detached housing units in the study area, 40% are considered affordable to a household of four earning over $63,000 annually, or 50% of the median family income. So when I say AMI, that's roughly the same as median family income. And I said 80% to 100, and the number I just gave was at 50%. So even lower, and that's the existing study area, 40% are considered affordable. And that was for attached and detached housing.
I have one additional question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gray.
Can you all, maybe the witnesses can address the same question I have now, and that is, are there issues around parking being available to people in Ward 7 as a result of the what we're trying to accomplish here? In the plan, of course.
Did you say
repeat the
parking,
Councilmember Gray?
Councilmember Gray?
Pardon?
Could
Did
you
you
repeat
say
the question,
park-
please?
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was asking if you could are there concerns about parking as contemplated by the plan that we've got in place at this point?
Great question, Councilmember. I think there's always concerns about how people get in, out, and through the corridor. One of the things that was mentioned and we had discussion on with the DC Office of Planning is around creating and this is more specifically geared toward the lower node of Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, but creating an environment that is multimodal, that's accessible to pedestrians that are on foot, on bike, that are catching the bus, or patrons that might be utilizing their vehicles to get to the various establishment that might be coming to the area. And so this gets back to one of my earlier statements around making sure that the small area plan is communicated effectively to DDOT and to other agencies to make sure that as they're looking to develop the public transit infrastructure to support the growing needs of this corridor, that they take a look at all of these facets to include parking, pedestrian safety, all of those things.
And just to add on to what Chairman Brown just said, I do believe that's parking concerns. They did come up in some of the meetings that OP held, but I think that's part of that is why there's a heavy emphasis on transit in this also, is to make it so that this is an area people can, live, work, and play. They wouldn't need a car to come here. If we had like a new restaurant and somebody from somewhere on the other side of town wanted to come here, they wouldn't necessarily need a car to do that.
I'm especially concerned, of course, about whether the grocery opportunities are going to be available to people in Ward 7 as a result of the small area plan that we're working to make happen here. we've got additional opportunities now being made available for people. Moreover, by comparison to just to follow what you're saying, Travis.
Councilman Gray, I just have to ask a question about that specifically. As you know, my remarks discussed the fact that we have a grocery desert here in Ward 7. And as a resident here, who has been eagerly awaiting so much development from Walmart to a grocery store here in the Penn Branch Shopping Center, and then receiving a Lidl in Skyland. I know there was a bit of disappointment at the lack of options. And again, I'm raising the question because if we are not working to increase a more diverse socioeconomic base here, and we have to be careful that we don't erode what we currently have by adding and increasing affordable housing units that don't meet our specific parameters. I don't see how we can attract viable grocery stores and other vendors that are going to be promised to folks without changing the demographics that have currently precluded us from getting those types of services here. And I feel like we have to be intentional in doing so. Otherwise, we might end up with more of the same.
Councilmember Gray, you've been 21 minutes. So do you have any other questions?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I had a follow-up with Ms. Cannon. You had very quickly run through the initiatives from the 2008 plan that haven't been implemented. Could you repeat those?
Yes, sir. I was reading from the 2008 plan. There were 5 major implementation items that were cited, and those areas were as part of the transportation and infrastructure, economic development, clean and safe, land use, and housing. If I just may focus on just one of those subcategories of economic development, the statement that I made is that one of the primary reasons why the Pennsylvania Avenue East Community Coalition was formed a couple of years ago was to specifically focus on economic development or lack thereof within our neighborhoods along the Pennsylvania Avenue East corridor. And from 2008, 3 of the key aspects of the economic development category, one was to create a marketing strategy to attract new retailers to vacant spaces. 2 was to conduct an analysis of technical assistance needs of existing businesses. And the third key component of that category was to use commercial facade improvement grant programs to create more attractive storefronts where buildings are not expected to be redeveloped. As an organization, PAECC primarily was focused on economic development and bringing to the awareness and highlighting the fact that the development that we all had expected to see as a result of the 2008 plan and other community studies and initiatives and programs and whatnot, they had not taken place from 2008 up until 2020 when our PAECC was established. There have been numerous organizations and individuals that had tried over the years to push forward economic development or to bring awareness to the development that was not happening, the lack of the grocery stores, the lack of sit-down restaurants, the lack of quality businesses along the corridor that we all would want to service. They weren't there. And as such, we advocated for the funding for the small area plan. We advocated for funding for the Main Street to bring focus, to bring a renewed sense of awareness to the fact that our community was not getting the kinds of services and was not getting the kind of economic development that we were seeing happening everywhere else around the city. As far as the the comprehensive plan was concerned. If you go to every other neighborhood in Northwest or Northeast, you see development everywhere, but that type of development was not happening in wards, at least Ward 7 along the Pennsylvania Avenue East corridor. So that economic development was a specific area, sir, that we saw was not getting the kind of focus that we felt it deserved.
Thank you.
I'm
You've
sorry.
answered.
Councilmember Mendelson, and I can expand on those 19 areas that were not completed from the 2008 plan, starting with transportation and streetscaping. This was a high priority. Implement Great Streets improvement as planned for the corridor east of the Anacostia River, including road work, median improvement, streetscaping, and signage element. Another high priority that was not completed was implement recommendations from the Middle Anacostia River crossing study, particularly those that aid in reducing regional traffic along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and provide greater access to I-295 North. Another one is explore possibilities of creating a heritage trail. Under economic development, high priority was create a marketing plan for vacant and new retail spaces. Work with property owners to promote spaces to desired retailers and local business owners. Another high priority, encourage the identification of or creation of a stakeholder coalition that can apply for public funding for business development, business area services, facade improvement. Such a group is necessary before funds can be released. Another high priority, extend pre-development assistance at key sites on the corridor east of the Anacostia River. Create strategy for retention and or relocation of businesses during any future construction or redevelopment. Enlist the services of the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership to provide analysis and strategies that will aid in recruiting quality retailers for the identified development sites. Plan for how tax increment financing TIF district funds will be most effectively utilized. Expand the commercial facade improvement program to aid in the renovation of commercial properties along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. Implement recommendations for the 2,300 to 2,700 blocks of Pennsylvania Avenue as part of OP's citywide retail action strategy. Under clean and safe topic, encourage creation of a clean and safe team. Conduct Operation Fix It at all commercial sites along the corridor to ensure regulatory compliance. Under land use, complete zoning review process of current zoning to make sure that zoning accurately reflects the intent of this plan and comprehensive plan. Under housing, utilize site acquisition fund initiative to secure affordable housing opportunities near key redevelopment site east of the river. Encourage funding of mixed income development at key opportunity sites along the corridor. These were all part of the 2008 plan. I did not mention there were two that were completed, and one that was completed was identify existing businesses along Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and evaluate specific needs for technical assistance. And that is being conducted by our Main Street program, Letitia Atkins as the director of that Main Street program. Another one was of the Penn Branch redevelopment or revitalization. Part of that has occurred. The current owners of Penn Branch did modernize its storefront. So those were the only two that were mentioned in this 2000 plan. Oh, one other was the Grays, the building of the Grays housing unit. I think that's a 2,500 block.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you still want me to provide that in writing to you?
That's been helpful because that gives me
Thank
what I need to ask the Director of Office of Planning. I believe we've been joined by Councilmember Henderson. Although we're about to turn to the Director of the Office of Planning. Councilmember Henderson, did you have any questions?
I didn't, Chairman Mendelson. I thought we were doing the nomination hearing for
That's
the
going to
auditor.
follow this. That will follow
Yes.
this.
But I've been listening to the conversation, although I missed the testimony from the public witnesses, but I've been listening.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to excuse all the witnesses. Thank you very much for your time and your testimony. And I'm going to turn now to the Director of the Office of Planning, Anita Cozart.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. If it's all right, I'll proceed with testimony. Right. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Gray, and staff of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Anita Cozart. I'm the Director of the Office of Planning. I'm pleased to share with the committee the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan transmitted to the Council by Mayor Muriel Bowser and led by OP. As outlined in the proposed resolution, the Pennsylvania Avenue Small Area Plan is a community-informed vision for the future of the corridor that creates a vibrant and inviting destination for all. The Small Area Plan boundary extends approximately 1.5 miles along the Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast from the eastern landing of the Sousa Bridge to Southern Avenue Southeast and extends a 1/4 mile north and south of the corridor. The neighborhoods in this planning area include L'Enfant Square, Randall Highlands, Penn Branch, DuPont Park, Fairlawn, Hillcrest, and Fairfax Village, Fort Davis. The Small Area Plan's recommendations are framed around the following 4 themes: economic development and retail opportunities, transportation access and connectivity, housing opportunities and affordability, vibrant public realm, and urban design. The recommendations in the plan will guide infill development, create vibrant public spaces, improve access to existing and new community amenities, and increase housing opportunities for all. The Small Area Plan contains equitable housing recommendations to help the district meet and exceed housing goals for the far northeast and southeast planning area. The Small Area Plan will guide zoning map amendments along with the comprehensive plan to increase housing supply and encourage a mixed income community that includes market rate and affordable housing. Foster great partnerships between housing providers and community-based organizations to preserve existing affordable housing and increase access to training and information for residents about homeownership opportunities, tenant protections, and accessory dwellings. In 2008, Office of Planning prepared and the DC Council approved by resolution a small area plan for Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. That study identified development concepts for focus areas within a 3-mile study area. The Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan builds on that 2008 plan by revisiting existing plan recommendations, highlighting new community aspirations, and providing supplemental guidance to the policies and land use changes that were approved in the 2021 comp plan update. The Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan was developed with the support of both residents and multiple community partners, including a community advisory committee composed of ANC commissioners, residents, service providers, and civic leaders who advised on how, when, and where to engage the community. The Community Advisory Committee provided critical perspective on proposed policies, and the interagency working group worked closely with community participants and the project team to conceive plan recommendations that address the needs identified by the community. Through the development of the draft plan, OP led or participated in over 30 events, both in person and online. This engagement yielded over 600 participants and 3,600 online comments. In-person community engagement took the form of community canvassing, public space activations, In addition, OP partnered with local community organizations to expand outreach through creative pop-up events, community canvassing, and public space activations like the Juneteenth retail activation with Southside Market featuring Black entrepreneurs. Updated racial equity policies in the 2021 comp plan and in the Council Office of Racial Equity's Racial Equity Impact Assessment tool inform the engagement process, the recommendation development, and the anticipated implementation of the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan. Community dialogue confronted the history of inequitable community investment and access to resources like quality housing and safe public spaces. Data used in the plan was disaggregated by race and analyzed considering different impacts by race with benchmarks identified for achieving more equitable outcomes. OP also worked closely with the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity to apply a racial equity lens, both as a process and an outcome throughout the small area plan. In conclusion, OP looks forward to working with district agencies, community partners, and the Zoning Commission to implement the recommendations contained in this plan. I want to take a moment to thank our staff who have led this planning process through challenges of a pandemic, our district agency partners who provided valuable subject matter expertise, and Councilmember Vincent Gray and his staff for their dedicated time and support. I also want to thank the hundreds of residents that have engaged with OP on the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan, in particular, members of the Community Advisory Committee and ANC's 7B, 7E, and 8A. Lastly, I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to discuss the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan, and I encourage prompt council approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Cozart. I have, I believe, 3 questions. We'll be on a 10-minute clock. First, one of the witnesses testified, we call on the Council's Office on Racial Equity to review the proposed small area plan before implementation to study the impact implementation will have on long-term residents and to modify the plan if it's determined that implementation would displace our long-term neighbors. Now, you can't call on the Council's Office, and the Council's Office evaluates legislation and it does not evaluate resolutions or the small area plan. But from the executive side, how would you respond to the call for a racial equity review?
So appreciate the call for that. And what I would flag is a couple of things. One, in our small area plans, this is the third of 3 new ones we've done since the adoption of the comp plan and the guidance in the comp plan about incorporating equity in small area plans. And what we have included is a section called Equity in Place, which is a brief summary of the work that we've done to embed equity throughout the beginning of the process all the way to this point, frankly. And it includes sets of approaches that we took to really answer the question about how the neighborhood has changed, how it will continue to change, and for whom. And so we've used that framing throughout, and it's documented in the small area plan. And then we also include specific benchmarks to think about, have we achieved our goals around racial equity? And those are included in the Equity in Place section. And so this is really a summary of the work of embedding a racial equity assessment and the questions that are associated with that throughout this 15-month process.
But I think the question in part deals with the issue of displacement. So how do you respond to that?
Sure. So what we have is, I would point us to the housing section. There are some of the recommendations that you read aloud in discussion around affordable housing. And in addition, there's sets of recommendations that are really focused in on how to both preserve affordability and make sure that there are opportunities to allow residents to stay in place and to continue to build wealth. And throughout, whether they're a large household or a smaller household, whether they're seniors or otherwise. And so I would point to recommendations 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7 and 3.8, which talk about the importance of partnering with implementing bodies that are focused on economic development and housing to really look at opportunities for affordable home ownership and also aging in place and the piece around accessory apartments as a wealth building opportunity.
There was another witness who criticized the plan for serving to further increase concentrations of poverty and low-income housing in the Far East communities. This will further exacerbate current affordable housing inequities. How do you respond to that?
What I would say is that certainly further concentration of poverty is not an objective of this small area plan. And what we worked to balance through the recommendations was the fact that, as the testifier pointed out, that some of the income levels are lower in our study area, and then the overall income levels throughout the district. And the approach we took around that was, and what we heard from the community is that there are these missing, there's not enough of affordable home ownership opportunities that exist. And that came up time and time again, both for new and first-time home buyers, but then also for folks who want to remain in place, given escalating costs around home ownership. And so that's what these recommendations are targeted to impact.
What one witness referred to as the missing middle. So you would characterize the recommendations in the plan as emphasizing where there's affordability, that it's for this missing middle.
Yes, and terms are difficult. I think the idea of really what came out of what we captured in the recommendations was really to capture the idea that there are not enough of those, whether you want to call it missing middle, workforce housing opportunities. There's not enough of those opportunities that exist. That's what we heard from the community, and the data supports that as well.
My third question is, several of the witnesses commented, but I'm looking at one in particular. Only 2 of the 19 actions from the 2008 small area plan were completed. And you were listening to the testimony in the back and forth, so you heard all the recommendations from 2008 that were outlined. The one that really stands out for me is transportation, given that one of the witnesses, a different witness, identified all the bus lines that were available in 2008 and all the bus lines that have been discontinued since then. So what about this small area plan is going to be different in terms of it actually being implemented?
So that's a great question, and is one that we reflected on as we got started at the urging of the PAECC. And as we looked through it, kind of our diagnosis as we were getting started with the plan was twofold. One, we had kind of a mismatch as it related to resources for implementers. So in the case of 2008, there was not really, as exists today, a Main Street that could carry and be held accountable for and get resources for the sets of economic development implementation items. There was also not sufficient alignment between the strategic planning that DDOT was doing at the time of the 2008 plan and what was listed in that 2008 plan. And so with both of those lessons learned in mind, we made sure to really leverage and deeply engage the Main Street in the creation of the recommendations, and to also deeply engage DDOT in the creations of the recommendations around transportation for that section. And so we think that that approach in and of itself is going to lead to better outcomes as it relates to implementation. Two other things very quickly that we did is that we created a development guide, which in many ways serves as a checklist and an accountability measure for outcomes. Desired outcomes, and that development guide is related to the specifics or takes into it the key recommendations related to development that are in the small area plan itself. And then the second thing we did was really have some listed out roles and expectations for various implementing bodies, and that's in the implementation section of this Pennsylvania Avenue East plan. And so those are additional tools that we put in place in response to those lessons we learned from the missing implementation from 2008.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Let me turn to Councilmember Gray.
I think we've exhausted a lot of my questions already, Mr. Chairman. So what are the next steps once the small area plan has been approved and being able to move forward with this, Ms. Cozart?
So the next steps for OP are really, we're in the process for this small area plan, but all of our small area plans is developing an approach to tracking progress and working with those who were involved in the small area plan and others to think about the cadence and the approach and the venues for sharing progress. And certainly building on kind of the interagency working group approaches that we've had. What are some ways that we cultivate for each small area plan that way of tracking progress, reporting on progress, and identifying issues that exist going forward?
I guess just my final question. What will be the role of the neighborhood implementation committees, Ms. Cozart? So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'm going to be general because once hopefully the plan is adopted, that's when the conversation around implementation really begins. So in general, the idea is to ensure that everyone who is deeply engaged in the crafting of these recommendations and is listed as an implementer, OP can bring that group together, and then the group can kind of decide who will continue to provide leadership for that. Certainly OP would be deeply engaged. The question is that something that PACC would like to do? Is that something that Main Street would like to do? We want to make sure that that's co-designed together. But the big framework is to make sure that we initiate that conversation and we help to make sure that it continues. I hope that helps to answer the question.
I appreciate that.
Does that conclude your questions, Councilmember?
It does. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Madam Director Cozart, I don't have any more questions for you. So I'm going to excuse you and I'm going to end this hearing. We have another hearing that will follow probably in about 5 minutes, which is a hearing on the nomination of Kathy Patterson to be reappointed as DC Auditor. With regard to the Pennsylvania Avenue East Small Area Plan, the record in this matter will close at 5 p.m. next Monday, February 6, 2023. And I will be noticing it for the agenda of the Committee of the Whole for markup on February 7th. And we have a legislative meeting that day as well. So assuming it gets to the committee of the whole, it would be before the council for adoption, which is to approve the resolution. That being said, I want to thank all the witnesses. I want to thank you, Ms. Cozart. I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Gray. The time is 1:53 in the afternoon and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.